Hi everyone, my name's Stephen from Irontree. I've probably met quite a lot of you in previous years when I was the Managing Director of Pastel. Hopefully most of you already know Irontree well. We provide backup services to around 17,000 businesses in South Africa. The business has been built up over about 10 years. We were known as really Pastel's backup service, our cloud backup service. And in the last year, we've expanded the product set of what Irontree does. And at Irontree, we feel that there's still many of our resellers and customers who aren't aware of the additional services that Irontree provides. Today, we're primarily going to speak about the hosting element of what Irontree provides. And we emailed many customers over the last 2 weeks, not only inviting them to this event, but also who's interested in hosting. It became quite apparent that there's a lot of, let's call it misinformation out in the market about what hosting really is. Because I think most people think about hosting as, you know, if you want your website, you've got to host it somewhere. But today, hosting as an infrastructure element is quite a paradigm shift in the way people work, technologically speaking. But practically speaking, you will see very little difference in in the way you work every day if you choose to use Irontree's hosting service. What's really cool is that while there's very little disruption to your business as you switch over to a hosted environment, you get all the benefits of being hosted. And for me, the benefits primarily are absolute simplification of your infrastructure. And let's just define infrastructure. It's all your laptops, your computers, if you've got a server in your office, all of that stuff disappears into one internet connection. So if I could just draw this on the board, let's assume this is your office. And just let's say you happen to be in Newcastle. So this is your office and you've got all your people in your office, and pretend there could be 2, there could be 20. There's one client of ours who has 80. And each person has a laptop, let's just say, and a computer. I'll just draw the one smaller, the other one bigger. And obviously they've got mobile phones. So in many situations, you've got people who work in that way, and then somewhere in their office, they'll have a server. And this server, a lot of these laptops will connect, or if you don't have a server, then all your data and everything in your programs are stored on each device. But there are many companies, especially with like more than 2 or 3 employees, who will actually have a server, and everybody connects to the server. And then obviously your main, let's say, point of failure is if the server goes down. So if the server's got Pastel data and the Pastel program, everybody's connecting. So what you would often do, and I think a lot of you do, is through the cloud, you would then back that server up, and even many of your notebooks and computers, back all that up to Irontree. So using your internet connection into the cloud, you then back up all that stuff to Irontree's data center. But just to be specific here, what you're actually doing is you're only backing up your data to Irontree. And this is like the primary concept here. And we've worked out that with our 17,000 businesses, normally it's a 10% ratio. So 10% of those 17,000, i.e. 1,700, every month restores something from Irontree back to their computers or their server. Obviously, in the last 2 years, ransomware has become a massive issue. So a lot of people are restoring data because of ransomware. But let's face it, You can restore data because of data corruption. You can restore data because theft, either computer got stolen or the server got stolen. So there are many reasons for restoring data. Hosting is about actually migrating your whole computer infrastructure from your office to the data center at Vodacom, where we have all our compute power. So you now take all your computer stuff that you worried about, your memory, your hard drives, all that kind of stuff, and you're actually using it in Auntry's infrastructure. So what happens in a crude way is Auntry has a massive computer sitting at the data center, and all your laptops, then you have an internet line, so you don't need the server anymore. That's a big thing, by the way. Me rubbing out that server is actually a hell of an important metaphorical or whatever analogy to the thing. You take out the complexity of that server. You're not worried about the power of that server. If a UPS blows up or your line, your actual electricity to that server goes down, you now don't worry about it, because everybody now, we almost take that server, pretend you're almost taking that server and putting it into Auntry's infrastructure. Now, while I say that, you're actually not going to do that. You're just going to scratch out that server and use our huge server where we host hundreds of clients at the Vodacom data center. And every one of your users in your office will still have a laptop. They will connect to that internet connection. And that internet connection will then follow through the internet, the cloud, and go here. So the question now is, well, where will your Pastel software be? Where will all your applications be? Your applications will actually sit here. And these will just be screens, essentially, into your Pastel running at our data center. So when you log in the morning, you're actually not going to see any difference. It will look like your old system. You'll be able to print, because just by the way, as a little anecdotal issue, hosting came about, let's say, properly about 5 years ago. And at that time, printing was an issue, because think about it, your main computer's now sitting at Auntry's data center at Vodacom, and there were printing issues when you're printing to a printer in your office. All of that stuff was resolved probably 2 years ago. So today, we've got clients in a point of sale environment. I mean, imagine that, where you're going to pick and pay kind of operations and their till slip printers and all of that. That's working flawlessly. So the printing thing is really being resolved. So again, all this mess, all the computers, all that stuff now just goes here. And these are really like windows into the infrastructure and your programs sitting over here. Now, once that penny drops, you need to think about, well, what are the advantages to that now? If my whole building burnt down, as long as you weren't in it, all you would do is you could work from home. So now pretend this is your home. And that's you in your home with a computer, and they're your little children. And now you connect, and you're seeing the same thing that you were seeing in your offices. So there's no more, I've got to take my data with me from my office to my house and work on it. You can log in from anywhere. You can be overseas. You just log in and you carry on working. Now, conceptually, what people didn't get in the email that I thought I explained well, but obviously I didn't. Your Pastel application, and I'm using that as an example because it could be any application. You're running Evolution, Pastel Partner, it could be any competitor of Pastels or Sages. It doesn't matter. It's any program. It's the same program. Now, when I was managing director of Pastel, and I was very instrumental in the Sage 1 cloud system, a lot of people couldn't move from their, let's just call it their old legacy Pastel software, Pastel Partner, to Sage 1. And the reason was primarily because the functionality of Sage 1 wasn't there. We wrote Sage 1 as a very kind of like, let's say 70-30 rule. You know, we'll have the features that most people use, but all the multi-warehousing and serial number tracking, we didn't put into Sage 1. So probably out of Pastel's 200,000 users, you know, there were probably, of those users, there were probably 10,000 who moved across to Sage 1. Although Sage 1 had 80,000 users, there were a lot of new people, but the established Pastel base couldn't move across because you didn't have the functionality. Obviously, training was a huge issue as well, that when you move on to new software, if you moved on to Sage 1, you've got to retrain your staff. And data migration was a massive issue as well, because you've got like 10 years of history in your current Pastel software. Now, how you're going to put all of that into Sage 1? Now, I'm not saying Sage 1 isn't a great option, but if there are good reasons that you can't move from your current desktop systems that you've been using for 5 years, all you do now is move it here and you connect to it from there. There are no disadvantages. The one point of failure, though, is that you need a decent internet connection. And we've tested it at length, and the internet connection speed that you need is probably 5 megabytes. But these days I've seen that with fiber, yeah, most things start at 10, 20, 30. At home I've got 100. In these offices we've got 250. But really, any basic vanilla flavored internet connection these days is about 10. So it's fine to run, because remember, all you're really doing, all your data sitting here, all your programs are sitting here. So what is actually being transferred to you as users in your office or your house is only the picture. There's actually, all the work is happening here. So again, when you distill this information and assimilate it in your head, you will then realize, let's say your business has now grown massively. In the old world, where your server's sitting here, you would have to call someone in and say, I need the server upgraded, I need better CPUs, I need more RAM. If that happens, all you do is you would phone Antri and say, do me a favor, on that server, when I originally spec'd it, I wanted 4 gigabytes of RAM and maybe 2 CPUs, and I want, let's say, 200 gigabytes hard drive space. If you want more than that, all you do is you phone us, and we just, honestly, it's as easy as flipping a little switch on a screen. We say, well, let's increase this client from 4, we'll move him to 8 memory. And hard drive, let's say you're running out of hard drive space, we'll give you an extra 200, so make it 400 gigabytes. And we just do that on the fly. Now, if you think about what you had to do in the old days, is you would either have to chuck out that server that I drew here 10 minutes ago, and either get a new server or get someone in to now upgrade it. And you know what happens with upgrades these days. They say your server's old, you really need the new technology. So if you bought the server for 60,000 Rand, and there's some people who can spend 200,000 Rand on the server, you would now have to go and re-spend that 200,000 Rand, or if it was 60, you have to go and spend the 60. You don't do that. You just do that incrementally here as you need more power. Let's talk about other advantages. You know that when you've got all your computers and the server and their software, when you upgrade your software, it's a mission. Over here, you're just doing it once. And everybody comes into that once event. Let's talk about antivirus stuff, ransomware. We protect this whole machine and back it up every hour to another machine in that office park, that Vodacom office park. So we're taking care of your backups. We're taking care of your antivirus protection. So because everything was scattered around everywhere, and now it's all in one place, your risks are minimized, not only from someone stealing stuff and losing data, but also from the cybersecurity element. And remember, that Vodacom Business Park where they got their data center, it's got 24-hour security. It's got a diesel generator that apparently can run for like a year in case there are electricity outages. So think about it. If there's an electricity outage for, let's say, 2 hours in your office, you would go into your notebook battery charge, You could use your mobile phone as your internet connection and you're still working. So I think that as a human being who's worried about, all these areas of risk, to have it all consolidated into one place has tremendous advantages. Your patch management is taken care of here. Your hardware maintenance, upgrades, everything is taken care on a managed basis by our entry staff in a very, very safe environment. A lot of people have asked me about internet connections and that stuff, but today, everybody's got one. 10 years ago it was different, but everyone's got an internet connection today. We can put your Office 365 there. We can put your mail service here. We can do all that stuff, but I wanted to keep this discussion very narrow to just your pastel software, your accounting software. And if some of you on the call are from accounting firms, you can have all your clients' data here. So imagine going out to do an audit. You don't even have to think about, did I have the right set of data? You could just log into your client's data who's sitting here as well and work in that manner. So really, there's no downside. Think about a lot of people say, oh, this is going to cost me about 1,500, 2,000 Rand a month for the hosted service. And obviously all that's depending on, how much memory you want on that machine, et cetera, et cetera. But there's so many hidden costs associated with keeping stuff in your office. I've spoken about the hardware costs. I've spoken about the theft issue, because by the way, your insurance policy should also come down, because you can now tell your insurance provider that all my stuff's in this 24-hour security diesel generator backed up. I mean, there are huge banks at Vodacom. I mean, they trust, Vodacom's infrastructure. So because your whole risk comes down, your insurance cost drops. You may have a IT service provider who's always running around your office fixing things and reconnecting things. You have no network issues anymore. Your actual local area network disappears, because it's all replaced with everybody just connecting to your LAN, through the cloud, into the data center. And when I speak to customers and they say, yeah, but 2,000 Rand a month, and listen, sometimes it can be 1,000 Rand a month depending on what you need. A lot of customers say, but that's expensive. And then I try and explain to them, please work out over the next 2 years what you're going to spend on replacing hardware, what you spend on your maintenance agreement with your service provider who's coming around every week, your office sorting out stuff, your insurance policy dropping, inconveniences that happen along the way because you've got all the stuff in your office. And to work out your true cost now, it's not about, oh, next month I've got to pay 1,500 Rand to R&T for all this stuff. And remember to incorporate your backups and all that stuff. But in the medium term, how's this going to help me in terms of just not having these little irritating issues that we always seem to have? With R&T's base, we can see that, we've always sold backup and cybersecurity stuff, data protection, antivirus, disaster recovery. The clients who have got onto the hosted thinking, all of a sudden you can see it becomes very urgent. I want to quote now. When can you get me over? And remember, there's no data migration. All we do is we take your backup that's at us anyway, and we move that data across. Install Pastel here. We've already done it 100 times. And you probably have to be down for an hour. And we do it at night, and then you log in tomorrow and everything's cool. In fact, typically what it looks like is we will set up over here. Let's call it a kind of example environment for you. You'll check it out, see if you dig it or not. We don't charge for that. And then when you're ready to go across, we already have your data. We just move it here and we say, okay, you now live in this free world of having all the advantages of, let's say, cloud applications, but it's still your old stuff running over here. And all these machines are just windows or screen into what's happening over here. And essentially, that's a hosted environment. And when you go to social events, you talk to people, and they just held, I was a bit anxious about moving into hosted environments, but since I've done it, I've just had no issues, because we take care of everything here. You don't have people saying, I forgot to run my backup last night, or I didn't update my antivirus software and I got hit with a virus. We're taking care of all that stuff. And unfortunately, the true benefit of all of that is only seen, after a couple of months when you then think back to the way you used to work. There's a particular client of ours who works in an industrial park, and there are issues with power. They are manufacturing concerns. So whenever their huge plastic molding machines turn on, very often their electricity in their office park gets a bit weird and they get data corruption on Pastel Partner. They've got to restore from a backup or send their data to be data fixed. That stuff all disappears now. You don't get data corruption through uneven electricity supply, because remember, the electricity in the Vodacom data center is so clean and so pure and so consistent that you won't ever have that story where your machine switches off. And remember again, and I'm sorry to those of you in the audience who kind of know this stuff, I'm going to repeat myself because I could see it through the emails. If your electricity bombs out here completely, Eskom's down, and you know what happens, all of a sudden your machine doesn't work, it's off. Your actual true machine is still running. It's just that the connection has been broken. But there's no issue that I was in the middle of processing an invoice and my computer went off, because the processing's happening here. So if you process an invoice and your machine went off, it's committed itself through the internet and it's happened there. You're not going to turn on your machine and think, now I'm rebooting Pastel. Pastel was always running. It's just your binoculars or your window, the vision that you had to it running, has been cut off. And so when you come back on again, this thing's saying, hey, I was always here, just connect with me again. That's all it is. So, once you think about that, you can actually appreciate the beauty, in fact, of this system. Everybody connecting there. So upgrading Pastel, what very often happens is you'll have your data sitting on your server and everybody's got Pastel loaded here. So when you upgrade, everybody's got to install the new version of Pastel. You don't have to do that anymore. Remember, all these things are really very simple machines looking at one version of the truth, and it sits over there. So guys, I know that we booked the session for 45 minutes or an hour, but I've never been one to just carry on talking to hear my own voice. I think that if you've understood what I've said, then you've got the basics. There's a lot of technical people who could want to know, so what does your infrastructure look like? Are you using a Hewlett-Packard stuff? What are your hard drives? Are they flash memory? All that kind of stuff. I'm not going to cover that. I'm just telling you that all these clients hosted with us at the moment who switched after many years of working on Pastel are very happy in this environment, and there are no issues. Auntry's responsibility in this whole equation is to make sure that our line going out from Vodacom is fast enough, which it is. We need to make sure that we're backing up the system all the time, which we do. And we need to make sure that as we fill this, because it's one machine where all of you sit in a very protected way, isolated from each other, we need to make sure that we are keeping enough memory and storage and all the stuff here. I actually thought to myself, it's like, I don't know how many of you go to Virgin Active. They sell thousands of memberships and they always hope that 10% of people are there at any one time. And therefore, but if everybody came at once, they would say we don't have enough space. That's the way we look at this, that we got to assume that everybody's there all the time. So we always need, let's say, 30% more compute power than we need. We need 30% more memory than we need, 30% more hard drive space that we need. Our firewalls and our Cisco routers in this infrastructure are absolutely state of the art. So you're not going to see any speed degradation. And as I said, you've really got nothing to lose because we can create a test environment here with Pastel. You guys can log on and you can carry on working. I actually have a screen here, which we're just going to share with you, which is a Pastel Partner screen where you logged on in this hosting environment, and you'll see what it looks like. So when you log in the morning, there's your Pastel. There's no difference. And remember, while you're running here, you can still Alt-Tab to get to your local programs that are running on your machines, because maybe you've got a chess program or something running, I don't know. Maybe you want to use Excel locally, but you want to use Pastel hosted. Yeah, you can do all of that stuff. It doesn't mean that you can only run Pastel if you're running in the hosted environment. You can still run your applications locally and store stuff on your hard drive if you want, or you can make a decision, I'll store all my Excel, Word, and Pastel data over here in the hosted environment and nothing, or you could do the hybrid. Pastel's the most mission critical thing. I'm going to keep that here, but my Microsoft Office and everything else I'll keep locally. You know, you can mix and match and make those decisions as you want. So, you know, when I used to sell Sage 1, I used to say, guys, you know, what is the benefit here? The benefit is that you can work from anywhere, whenever you want to. You've got one version of the truth. You don't have multiple sets of data. It's all in the cloud. And all you need is an internet connection. All those advantages remain, except with the additional advantage that it's the old software that you like, that's feature rich, that was developed over 10, 15 years, and there's no retraining. Everybody just carries on like they did. So guys, if you've got any questions, you can ask them on the WebEx, or I would actually prefer if you wrote an email or phoned us for a quote, phone us for a discussion, because, you know, I'm talking to a wide audience and obviously some people know more than others. And yeah, just communicate with us. The 3 user, if you've got 3 users, that will cost you about 2,000 Rand a month. Now that includes everything. I'm just looking at my notes here. It includes your backup. It includes your Panda cybersecurity stuff. So don't just look at how my hosting's costing 2,000 Rand a month. It's all that other stuff running around, which you don't even have to think about. It just happens. A 10-user system will probably cost 5,000 Rand a month. Some people may say, you know, that's, you know, 5,000 Rand, a lot of money. But remember, no more hardware upgrades. You no more inconvenience of being down and all that kind of stuff. It's a very known quantity. If you want to upgrade hardware, you phone us. Your 2,000 Rand a month will now go to probably 2,100 Rand a month because you want a bigger hard drive, as opposed to having to buy a hard drive and go and get somebody to come in and install the hard drive. So really, your Windows operating system is also included in that cost. By the way, that's also very important. Byron, thank you for mentioning that. So don't just look at the 2,000 Rand a month. It includes your Windows. It includes your operating system updates. It includes your server management. And how often do people get hit by viruses because their operating system, their Windows, wasn't kept up to date? We manage all of that stuff, included in the fee. Backup, antivirus, Windows operating systems, the hard drive, the memory, all that stuff is now included. So if you had to start a business again and actually decide to go hosting from the beginning, you could say, hell, you don't have to pay 100,000 Rand for the server. I don't have to buy these very powerful laptops because all the compute power is needed here. And I'll upgrade them maybe once every 5 years, you know, just because I feel like it. We like buying new things, but there'll be no necessary requirement to do that. Just the internet connection, which you have everywhere. Anyway, so thank you very much for that. We're available for discussions, quotes, test servers. Check it out. I have no doubt in my mind that in 5 years' time, I think 80% of people will be running this way because the complexities and the risks are just too great and the convenience is so cool. So thank you very much for dialing in and listening to me. Hopefully I'll speak to you and see you soon. Cheers.
Steve, don't go yet. Can you hear us? Steve's muted.
David?
Steve, can you just address a couple of questions? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, so we had, what's the first question? Okay. We had Gregory, who lives in a kind of rural KZN, who's worried about his internet connection. He says that there's not a very good connection, it's very expensive. So I think, I mean, the comment would be that obviously we feel that like 90% of people would be able to go hosting with reliable, affordable internet fiber connectivity, but we have to recognize that I suppose there are still some outlying areas where it is a bit risky. Would you agree with that?
No, there's no doubt. You know, I don't want to fool anyone here. We don't want to create inconveniences. If your internet line is suspect, specifically if you live in a rural area, then you cannot do this. I would not recommend it. Because even if you fall over to your phone, as you know, in this country, data through phones is huge. But again, that's changing. You know, you're getting 5G apparently is going to be rolled out. And this country knows that if you want to educate your population properly, and specifically because there's so many people living in rural areas, all that's going to be addressed. So, Gregory, it's going to take a couple of months, maybe a year. And we say, because I think the government's acutely aware of specifically education over the internet, how important it is. So these things will be addressed, but currently you can't do it. Okay. Anything else, Dave?
Yeah, I'd just like you to go over that answer you gave about what happens if your power goes down, because we have, where is it? Can't find the question. We have a question from one of our delegates who said, what happens if I lose power when my laptop comes back on? Has the pastel closed? So can you just recover that ground? It's on our server and it doesn't close.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so just to go over that point again. Your pastel here never shuts down. The problem today is that people are running pastel on their notebook. So if your notebook loses power or you're running on a desktop and Eskom has a, what do they call it, load shedding, your pastel stops running. Your pastel's always running here. All you're doing is you are connecting to pastel that's always open and always running. And this doesn't go down, as I said, because, you know, Vodacom has banks and all kinds of things. So they've got their diesel generator that they tell me can keep going for a couple of months. Because if that goes down, you know, then obviously there are massive infrastructure businesses that will fail. So you don't have to worry about that ever. You never, ever have to worry about your laptop or your computer losing power and going down. It's just all this thing will say is, oh, user logged off. That's all that's going to happen. But all my stuff's still loaded and all still there. And then eventually you'll connect back. That's all that's going to happen.
Okay, Steve, there are a couple of questions about the size of line that you need, bandwidth you need, the power of the machines, and that kind of stuff. Can you just explain how all the computing power and processing power happens on our server, and all the only data that's coming across the line is the actual
okay. So remember, through the internet connection to the working machine, which is in mid-rand, all you're doing is actually moving the characters on the screen backwards and forwards. There's no computing power happening there. So over here, honestly, you could have the lowest grade machine, I mean that sincerely, running in your office with the tiniest hard drive, RAM. Remember, I'm talking about for the applications here. If you're running Office 365 locally, you're still going to want a decent machine. But if all that it's mainly there for is to connect your applications there, you can get the lowest spec machine in your offices, because all we're really doing is using your screen. The computing power, let's say you did this mad kind of, pretend it's you running a chess program, because that's extremely compute intensive, or pretend it's a video editing program. Those are the most compute powerful, hungry, greedy programs that there are. It's happening here. So you don't need powerful machines here. If you're running that chess program, let's say, or let's say you're running Pastel, but you've asked Pastel to do a freaked out thing like, I need my stock report over the last 10 years divided by the number of customers and days that it's been on the shelf for. That complicated, power-hungry process is not happening here. You've just told this thing to go and do it. So it's all happening here, and hopefully that explains the point, Dave.
And Dile, he wants to know, are the Sage upgrades, etc., maintained by Irontree, or are these still to be managed by internal Irontree team? So can you just go over that?
Andile, are you the Andile or no? Well, okay, let's pretend you are. Ideally, you can make that call yourself. You know, you could say that we need to do the upgrades, or you may have an RT skill yourself where you just say, listen, you know, like some of us are control freaks. I want to do that. So we've got, you know, of those clients that we're hosting at the moment, probably 70% of them are telling us to do the Windows upgrades and the patch management and all that stuff. The other guys will say, listen, give me the hosting service. I'm going to log in and do that kind of stuff. It's your call. We've got no hard and fast rules here. Because let's say you're a Pastel client. Okay, this is an interesting one now. Pretend you're a vanilla Pastel client, but you've had a lot of modifications done, outside programs written, and you know, there's like Let's App do a lot of add-ons. In that environment, I would suggest that you do your upgrades, because that's like a bit complicated. I don't want to take chances in upgrading user software where in fact you've had your own modifications done. But when you sign up with us, we got terms and conditions, and you know, we have a proper chat about your environment so that we can then advise you, listen, rather get your Pastel value-added reseller to be the person who actually upgrades the Pastel part of this. We'll still do the Windows upgrades and all that kind of stuff, but the Pastel part of it you can look after.
Dealer that you know, by the way. It is the dealer that you know.
How's it, Andile?
There have been a few questions about server hardware and stuff. Dries, this goes to your question. So Steve, can you just mention again what you were saying about the elasticity of the server, that we can, you know, upgrade the processing or downgrading as we see the demand requires?
Okay, listen, for those of you who are interested, I'm going to rub this off the board, okay? And for those of you who know me, you know I'm no hardware expert, but I've had to pay for all this stuff, so I spent a lot of money, so I had to get to know it. So the way it looks is, at the data center, we've got our own infrastructure, and we have 5 of what we call these compute units. Am I running out of space? 5, is that 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each one has its own memory, its own, memory and CPUs. Each one has its own memory and CPUs. Then all of this stuff is basically governed by a thing called VMware. And obviously you've got your Cisco routers and the firewalls and all that stuff sitting there. So these compute units all talk to each other. Each one has its own memory CPUs, and then underneath here, there's a massive array of memory, what they call but storage, but what does flash disks? SSDs, so it's like quick memory. And all of these use the memory, the hard drives you could call it, but it's actually flash disks because they're very quick. So we're using all the compute power from these things to store all their stuff here. And it's all managed through VMware. So what would happen is, let's say you want your Pastel system. We would put it on, let's say, compute unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we're just ordering another 3. But let's say your Pastel is sitting in that block on compute unit 1. The whole time, these things are backing up across each other. We have our own backup thing here, by the way, but that's in case there's a nightmare. But if this thing fails, VMware takes care of it and moves it onto the next machine, the compute power and all that stuff, but your stuff's still stored here. So the failover, redundancy, they call it in this industry, is huge. But I want you to think that there's a computer of yours sitting there. It's in this pool, if I can call it, of shared resources. And that's why it's so easy to increase your memory. Because if you signed up for a 2 gig memory, 2 CPUs, and let's say 500 gigs hard drive, all we do is we tell VMware that this machine needs that amount of resources allocated to it. Then you say, oh, my business is growing, I need 600. So then we just flip a switch and you've got 600 because it's sitting in this pool. All we do is we just allocate stuff to you, which really simplifies life. And you don't have to freak out. It's like, when you go to buy a machine and you're talking to your IT person, look, should we get a 100 gig machine? What? You can start off with what you want and say, you know what, let's check how it goes. If it's fast enough, I don't need to spend the bucks on this huge machine. If it's slow, I didn't commit myself to any kind of like permanent thing. I can just phone Andre and say, give me a bit more. In fact, I'll tweak it until I see, oh, it's cool. The staff's happy. It's doing what it should be. So you don't have to worry about these. And I remember when I used to work at Sage, when we bought a server, it was like, you'd think about it for hours. Like, should we get that one or that one? You don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. And by the way, all the stuff is IBM, Hewlett-Packard, and Cisco kit. So it's state of the art from extremely reliable, or in fact, the best vendors in the world. Dave, anything else?
No, I think we got everything, Steve. This is Jaco on the side. Guys, I'd like to encourage you to reach out to us. So you all have my email address. You can reach out to Byron, or you can even reach out to Steve directly. But yeah, chat to us if you have questions, if you want to see what certain arrangements would cost you, we can definitely help you with that. But yeah, we're very excited about this service, and Steve, thanks to you explaining it very nicely today.
Okay, I just want to end off by saying, like, sometimes, you're stuck. You've bought machines. Now we've already... To make it clear for yourself, just think about if you started a business again from scratch, how much more simple this would be. Because as a business evolves and changes, there's no time that you can say, oh, that's when we kind of started again. Just buy into the future in a very thought out manner. But I think it's so easy when you think to yourself, hell, if we started again, I could have spent far less money on my current infrastructure, used that, safe, no issues. And that principle still applies because these machines that I drew on the board earlier in your office, they're going to be replaced anyway in time. So, you've got to make a call at some point because you can't say, well, let me wait till I have to replace my machine. Listen, it's a free world. You can make your own choice. But if I started a business today, there's absolutely no doubt that that's the way I would go.